As of November 30, 2025, the Ohio government has taken several significant actions in response to the ongoing federal government shutdown and its impact on state residents, particularly regarding food assistance and support for vulnerable populations. There are no reports of major legislative activities, enforcement actions, or public events specifically dated November 30, 2025, but the state's actions throughout November have been substantial and directly relevant to the end of the month. Major government actions. The most prominent government action in November 2025 was the state's emergency response to the suspension of Federal Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, benefits due to the federal shutdown. On November 10, the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services, ODJFS, announced that following new federal guidance, the state would begin distributing partial November SNAP benefits. This action was a direct result of updated instructions from the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Food and Nutrition Service, FNS, which had previously reduced SNAP maximum allotments to 50% for the month of November due to limited federal funding and court orders. On November 13, ODJFS received further federal guidance on restoring full November SNAP benefits. The state agency began working to implement this restoration, ensuring that eligible households would receive the full amount of their SNAP benefits for the month. This process involved updating systems, notifying affected households, and coordinating with local agencies to distribute benefits as quickly as possible. In addition to the SNAP response, the state continued to administer its own emergency food aid program. Governor Mike DeWine had previously announced a $25 emergency plan to cushion the impact of the federal shutdown. This included $7 allocated to several Ohio food banks, such as the Freestore Food Bank in Cincinnati, the Akron Canton Regional Food Bank, Second Harvest Food Bank of the Mahoning Valley, and Second Harvest Food Bank of North Central Ohio. The remaining funds were distributed to other food banks as part of the $7 total. The state also provided up to $18 in emergency relief to more than 63,000 Ohioans enrolled in Ohio Works First, OWF, the state's cash assistance program for families at or below 50% of the federal poverty line. This aid was intended to help families who would otherwise lose SNAP benefits, and it effectively doubled monthly OWF benefits for the duration of the shutdown. The first weekly payments were expected to reach recipients by November 7. Legislative activities. There were no new legislative activities reported for November 30, 2025. However, earlier in the month, Ohio Senate Democrats had urged Governor DeWine to use the state's Rainy Day Fund to continue funding SNAP benefits in the event of a federal funding lapse. They argued that the state should take immediate action to ensure that over 1.4 million Ohioans who depend on SNAP would not go hungry. The Democrats identified the $3.9 Rainy Day Fund as a potential source to cover the $263 needed to fund SNAP benefits for 1 month. Enforcement actions. There were no specific enforcement actions reported for November 30, 2025. The state's focus remained on the distribution of emergency food aid and the restoration of SNAP benefits, rather than on enforcement activities. Public events. There were no major public events reported for November 30, 2025. The state's public communications centered on the distribution of emergency food aid and the restoration of SNAP benefits, with officials providing updates through press releases and news conferences. Key provisions and details. The state's $25 emergency food aid plan included $7 to food banks and up to $18 in emergency relief for OWF recipients. The emergency relief was targeted at families at or below 50% of the federal poverty line, with over 57,000 children among the recipients. The state's actions were intended to bridge the gap until federal SNAP benefits were restored, not to replace federal programs. The Women, Infants and Children (WIC) program was secured through December with $10.3 in federal funding, ensuring uninterrupted benefits for approximately 180,000 Ohio mothers, infants and children. The state's emergency food aid and SNAP restoration efforts were coordinated by the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services, with support from Governor Mike DeWine and other state officials. In summary, the Ohio government's actions on and around November 30, 2025, were focused on addressing the immediate needs of residents affected by the federal government shutdown, particularly in the area of food assistance. The state's emergency response included the distribution of partial and full SNAP benefits, the allocation of emergency funds to food banks, and the provision of additional cash assistance to low-income families.